I'm a 21-year-old male. It was July 4th, 2019. I live in Kansas in the USA. At the time, I worked as a corrections officer at a maximum security prison on the night shift. The cell house I was in charge of was the maximum general population, basically one man to a cell. This is where the murderers, rapists, and overall the worst of society were housed at. Before I went into work, I was doing the typical American 4th of July things. Grilling, blowing up fireworks, had a beer or two, and had a really great time with my now wife and family. My wife kept telling me that I just needed to call in sick and take the day without pay. I said no because we were a little behind on our bills. Looking back at it now, I really wish that I would have listened to her. As the night went on, it came time for us to leave my mom's and for me to go home and get ready for work. I took my wife home, dropped her off, got ready, and left for work. My wife's car was broke down, so she was stuck at home for the night. As I drove to work, which was about an hour drive away, I had watched the fireworks going off all around. It was sad. I had never had to work on the 4th before. After I got to work and got all of my equipment, I got into my cell house. It was business as usual. The inmates were showered and locked up. I got my night cleaning crew out so that they could clean the rest of the cell house, and then met up with my partner for the night in the officer station to get our briefing from the last shift. Fast forward into about an hour into my shift. So now it's right around 12:30 a.m. Another officer came into the cell house, so now there's 3 of us. This happened pretty often on night shift, as there was really nothing to do except rounds every half hour or so. Out of nowhere, we hear an inmate that just starts laughing like a witch. The way to describe it was kind of like a cackle. That was really strange, but nothing really to be alarmed with. Drugs were a pretty bad problem in that facility. Still is as far as I know. Eventually, after a few more cackles, I decided to go and check out who was making the sound in case they were high. I walked through and checked all 200 inmates. Nothing. There were a small few that were even awake, so I decided to just brush it off and went back to my office. My partner and the other officer were asking if there was anyone that needed their cells searched. I couldn't really think of anyone in particular that I suspected of having anything, so I decided to go and check all of the cells yet again just to see if I could get a whiff of smoke or something. As I was walking on the 2nd-story cell run, I then found an inmate that was acting pretty weird. He was in his bed facing the wall and talking. This was also common as there was a lot of inmates with minor mental health issues. I figured he was just high because he turned and looked at me and then told me to screw off. I was honestly going to leave him alone, but the disrespect made me change my mind. I walk back to the office and I tell the other 2 officers which cell he was in and that I want him searched. Cell 218. So the cell house is laid out and there's about 100 cells per level. From the officer station, you can see the north side, 1st and 2nd floor. But you can't see the south side unless you walk the 50 feet over to it. Now, picture the movie Shawshank Redemption type cell house, except instead of being able to look through it and see all of the cells across, all you see is a wall. The cells are literally back to back. As the officers go pull him out of his cell to search it, I went to the ground floor and I was watching from below. The reason why is that I wanted to get the inmate on the ground level and not the 2nd floor. All that was there for protection from going over the edge was a handrail. I began to notice that this inmate was taking forever to get out of his cell. He then came out in shorts and a do-rag, which is kind of weird because he wasn't fully clothed, didn't even put sandals on, just shorts and a do-rag, yet took 5 minutes to get out. Now, I'm not gonna lie, that made me a little nervous. The inmate was a 6-foot-tall, 250-pound muscle-bound dude. He definitely had size on us. So from the ground, I then holler at him and I tell him to come down to the ground and that he could use the phone or check his email if he wanted. Well, he declined my offer, which literally never happens. That's when I knew something was up. He was watching them search his cell from the control panel box. This was pretty alarming. They were in his cell, I was on the ground. He could have easily ambushed them. He would have made it to them before I could get up the stairs. So to try and keep them safe, I went up the stairs to the inmate. He was standing in the corner away against the handrails at the top of the stairs. He knew that I was the officer in charge of that cell house, and he knew that I was the one that saw him talking to himself. He asked me why I was having his cell searched. I lied. I said, "It's nothing personal, man. I just have a quota that I have to fill for cells searched in a night, and you were awake. So I just chose to have you searched. It'll just take a second." He was uneasy. He was pacing. Something wasn't right. Then I saw it. He had turned just right, and I saw in his do-rag the Samsung logo. I could see it reflecting in the cell house light. Crap. I knew there was going to be a problem as soon as I saw it. He had a cell phone. I called over the radio for 2 additional officers to come help me. The inmate didn't seem to notice that I made the call. My supervisors responded, saying that 2 of them were on their way. Side note: at this time, only segregation officers had protective vests. So out of the 5 of us that were now in there, only 1 of us had a vest. And I was not that one. The officers' names were South, McCormick, Collins, Sheffield, and me. This is now 12:58 a.m. As soon as South and McCormick got up to me, I told the inmate to turn around and cuff up. South and McCormick were on the inmate's right side, and I was in front of him.
Why? Why are you doing this?
He angrily asked me. I refused to give him a reason at first. After a few minutes, I had enough. I told him, "Look, man, I can see the cell phone in your do-rag. You know you're not supposed to have that." The inmate then gets this really defeated look on his face, but fire in his eyes. His body relaxes, and then he slowly reaches up to retrieve the phone. But does he pull out a phone? Nope. He then pulls out a 6-inch sharpened metal rod with ripped fabric wrapped around the bottom as a handle. Everything froze for me. I knew I was going to die. Everything starts moving again. I now have an inmate twice my size charging me, thrusting quickly and repeatedly towards me. "Oh shit!" was all that I could manage to yell. I immediately went in defensive mode, trying to grab his arm and disarm him. His wrist kept slipping. I couldn't keep a hold of it, but at least I managed to block his attempts at my lower abdomen. Suddenly, he then aimed high and went for my chest. I felt it make contact. I had just been stabbed in the right part of my chest. I yelled at the top of my lungs. McCormick was already working on spraying the MK9 OC spray. For the people knowledgeable about military, you know what I mean. For others who don't know, MK9 comes as a pressured spray bottle, about 20 fluid ounces. You can buy it at a camping store in the USA, and it's called bear spray. It's the stuff that you spray in bears' eyes so you can get away. South had come up behind the inmate and grabbed him around his chest and then pulled him backwards right as McCormick sprayed him in the eyes. I didn't realize it at the time, but the spray hit me, the inmate, and South, as well as everyone else that was near us. I was able to turn and run. I ran around the stair railing past the panel box and out into the run of cells on the 2nd story. I ran past a few cells and turned around to see that he wasn't chasing me, but that South was wrestling him to the ground while gagging on the OC, as was I and McCormick. Sheffield, having heard the commotion, came running out of the cell, saw what was happening, and then ran in to help us. The inmate grabbed South by the vest and tried to throw him over the end of the landing, but South dropped to his knees before he went over. I grabbed the microphone on my shoulder and then screamed into it. Dispatch said something back, but I didn't hear it. I started to charge back to help save South. Before that I could get away from the cell that I was in front of, Collins grabbed me from behind and he told me not to go. Due to the layout of the runs, I didn't see, but Sheffield had grabbed the inmate from behind and then body slammed him on his face. Then he began cuffing him. Sheffield got covered in OC as well, due to the inmates being covered in it. As soon as Collins let me go, I stood still and watched. Up the stairs came 4 more officers, the captain and the lieutenant. The lieutenant came and asked me what happened, and I started to explain, but he then cut me off after he saw blood coming out of my left arm. After taking me out of the cell house, he made me lift my shirt up because he saw the blood. He examined all my wounds. He had me remove all of my equipment and hold paper towels to my arm. I was rushed to the ER. I was able to grab my phone out of my car. I then called my wife and told her what happened. She then called my parents and my siblings. Luckily for me, my injuries weren't too bad. I was stabbed 4 times. Once on my left arm just below the elbow. That was a through and through. Blade went in one side and out the other, then twice in the top of my left hand. And the one that hit my chest went into the skin and hit one of my ribs, which was actually keeping it out of my lungs. Out of about 37 plunges, I think it's safe to say I'm pretty lucky to be here writing this story. I didn't sleep for about 2 days following the event. I still have nightmares almost daily. I'm always paranoid. I openly carry a gun now. After my attack, I was then forced to resign for safety reasons. Everyone statewide that works in max prisons now has vests. None of the people that I worked with over there talk to me anymore. I feel abandoned. I have one guy from that facility that I still see, my sergeant, but he wasn't there that night. Court is coming up soon to add 3 more attempted murders on this guy. As it turns out, he was apparently a shot caller for the Crips. And I guess that's why I had no problem going after a CO. Back in the 60s, my dad worked as a guard at a prison near Miami. He described his most memorable experience to me recently. He says that there was one prisoner who was a lot like a younger Hannibal Lecter. Very calm but very menacing. He always kept his cool no matter what, but there was something really threatening about him. Well, one day young Lecter was able to start a riot on his cell block, purely by motivating all of the other prisoners into a frenzy. Now, he didn't participate in the riot himself at all, but he got literally every other prisoner to start a fit in their cell. My dad and a few other guards were called to the cell block to quiet them all down. He says that when he got down there, every single prisoner was screaming and throwing themselves against the walls of their cells, as well as shouting profanity and insults to the guards. That is, every single prisoner except Lecter. He was the only quiet one on the whole block. My dad came up close to his cell, and the guy was standing near the back with his hands folded, staring my dad directly in the eye and then muttering a random sequence of numbers with a strange smile on his face. My dad just stood there trying to figure out what the numbers meant, and then it finally hit him. The prisoner was reciting my dad's home phone number on repeat. Yeah, hell no. I grew up in a private American school in a foreign country in Europe, which I shall not name. The school was situated kind of in the middle of a really big hill, and even further above the school was something really special, an abandoned prison. Now, as if that was not shady enough, bordering the abandoned prison was a real prison. There was kind of like a wall separating the real prison from the abandoned one. The prison had layers. A total of about 3 brick walls were in between the last 2. So anyway, us being the teenagers we are, decided to find a way to break into the abandoned part. As you can see from the picture, we had already gotten beyond the second layer of wall, and the wall ran all the way around with barbed wire in many places. One lunch break, I heroically managed to tear down a huge section of the wall during lunch. But the next day we arrived and it was then patched up by someone. That didn't stop us though. We climbed on through anyway and decided to do some exploring. Now, this all happened over the course of many months, and it took us ages to work up the courage to finally get inside. A bunch of us were doing AP 2D art, and we had our cameras with us all the times to get some shots. Half of my best work came from this prison. But one day, an event happened to us that made us all swear to never go back. As I mentioned, we did this over months, so sometimes there's snow, sometimes we're in light clothes. We took pictures of notebooks and logs we found, but I don't want to post them due to keeping the country unknown. So as months and months went by, we got more and more confident wandering around the prison. We never went in too deep, and we were always scared of getting close to the wall within the real prison because there were always security guards. Sometimes we would run into gypsies scraping for metal, and sometimes a random homeless person or two, but nothing ever dangerous. Once a couple of guys got busted by security, and we didn't go back for weeks. But we eventually learned the schedule of the guards, and we befriended the homeless dude who hung around there, so we were pretty comfortable. 2 years went by of some exploring here and there until one night a friend and I decided to go there and do some late night shooting. We dressed up, organized our things, and we met by one of the holes of entry at midnight. We had some videos of us going through some of the sections of the prison this night, but we decided to delete them out of fear. We never wanted anyone to know what happened this night, as well as the thought of the videos being traced. It was really dark in the depths of the prison, so the reason we were filming was to use the flashlight on our phones. This was a while back and you couldn't just press a button to get the light, but you had to film something. Our goal on this night was to get up as high as we could. Now, there were at least like 10 floors, and just about all of the staircases that we had found during our daily exploring were totally sealed off. If we spent lunch breaking one down, the next day it would be repaired again. Now, this prison was huge, and it had many staircases all over the place. Now, most of the rooms were fairly large. Each floor was completely different to the previous one, and it was very hard to tell what went on here. From what we could gather, it was some sort of labor factory that the prisoners were forced to work in. We found a couple of rooms that were completely full of shoe soles. Another floor had a really long hallway, and each room was vividly painted in different patterns. Some rooms had a lot of mattresses stacked on top of each other. You get it. A whole lot of really creepy rooms with random creepy crap. Every new floor that we explored was a totally new surprise for us, and it kept on becoming more and more difficult to find new ways to go higher up. But eventually we found it, and that's what we came to do there that night. Get to the roof. As I mentioned, the prison was on a hill, so the view itself was bound to be fantastic, and we figured that at night the guards would have a harder time spotting us. So back to the night. We kept getting deeper and deeper, and it got darker and darker. There were a lot of dripping noises everywhere around us, and we couldn't really tell if we were alone. We got to our desired staircase, and as we climbed up, there became fewer and fewer windows until we were pretty much climbing into pitch darkness. I'm actually shaking as I'm even typing this, just remembering the terror that I felt. Nonetheless, it was the only unsecured entrance, so we had to keep climbing. Things started to get weird from here. The stairs were in the form of a zigzag with no railing, so you could pretty much fall right down in the middle. To get to the staircase, you had to go through this really long and dark hallway, so once you're at the bottom of the stairs, there's almost no light at all. Soon we began to realize that at the end of each zigzag, there were these holes in the wall. To get through one of them, you'd literally have to pull yourself up and into it, because it was just a tiny little slit at the top. We flipped a coin, and it was decided that I was to go through. I really wish that I never had. I pray to God that I never had. I crawled through and hopped into a box that was like confinement, with no windows or anything. You couldn't fully stand up, and you had to either lay down or squat. I looked around and found pornography that was plastered all over the walls of this place, as well as tissues and other disgusting things. Injection needles were among one of the things there too. That wasn't the worst part though. The worst part was when I took a look at the notebook that was laying on the ground. The writing was in a foreign language which I could read, and it seemed to document a worker's logs. There happened to be a name that was then followed by a sign-in and sign-out timestamp. The most recent entry was made about 2 days ago. 2 freaking days ago. I rushed out of that space like my life depended on it, and I then told my friend that we've got to get out of here. While I was inside, my friend noticed that there was one of these slits on every level, and that they were also numbered and had a placeholder for a tag. They were cells. We noped the hell out of there and began climbing down when I reasoned to my friend that it's almost 1 a.m. and we really need to go up now before it's too late. It took me some time, but I finally persuaded him to go back up and make it to the roof, then we could leave. We went up until finally we saw the light. Absolutely delighted, we burst through the door completely without thinking and began expressing our relief and cries of joy. We felt like we had conquered the worst part and completely relaxed. Everything was going great. That is, until suddenly my friend then freezes in his tracks and then tells me to shut the hell up right now and get to the staircase. Absolutely panicked, I ask him what he's on about. Now, the staircase that we had just come from had a little house over it, if that makes any sense, and he was then looking at something over the edge of the corner. Then I hear another voice, which is definitely not my friend's. We were both these 2 fairly well-off kids from American upbringings, and the man was speaking in a foreign language. Luckily, I could understand it, but we like to frequently pretend that I didn't, just to kind of screw around with the locals. My friend was pretty used to me pretending that I don't understand a word, so when the man said something, he just stayed quiet and motioned that I keep my mouth shut. My friend was then signaling for me to get to the staircase when I heard the man yell,
"Don't move!"
I froze dead and I didn't know what to do. About 5 men come from around the house thing and into my sight. 2 of them were standing and the others were sitting on the curb of the roof. All it would take is just one push to be tumbled down to your death. Now, these guys look serious. Pumped arms, sweatpants, bandanas, and for the best part, they had swastikas on their arms. This is something we never expected. The man motions at me, and then he yells for me to come closer. I nervously tell him in English that I don't understand him. I don't know how I thought this would help, but I speak quite a bit of German, and I suppose in my logical brain I thought that maybe they would do less harm to 2 Germans. By pure luck, my friend happened to be Swiss, and he spoke it pretty fluently. The man then yelled at us, asking what language we're speaking. My friend looks over at me, absolutely panicking, desperate to know what our next move should be.
"Ah, Germans."
And the group then laughs. I hear one of the men say to the others in the foreign language,
"They've seen the products."
The head of the gang looks at us and comes closer. It was really dark, so I couldn't really see what they had circled around, but there were black gym bags at their feet.
"Come closer,"
he then says to both of us. We come up closer to the group and the man starts asking us questions in English. Who we are and why we're there. Then he started asking really personal questions. Our full names, where we live, etc. The questions were clearly directed at making it easier to find out as much as they could about us. Neither of us had money, but we both had our iPhones on us. We had no idea what they had planned for us next. One of the sitting guys then gets up. Then he asks me,
"Did you see anything?"
"No, I didn't see anything," I shakily reply. Then he comes up to my friend and he asked him the same thing. For a brief moment, I glanced over at the bags and I suddenly wished that I would be anywhere but there. Hell, I'd even rather be in that cell. I just really wish that we had never come back. I think you can guess what was in the bags. Guns. Not just one gun, but guns. As in bags and bags of what was probably illegal firearms. In a smaller bag to the side, there was a ton of rolled up cash. We just stumbled into an illicit firearm deal. The guys now started discussing about what they're going to do to us. They didn't realize that I understood every single word. One of them kept pleading that we're just stupid kids, and if they rough us up a bit, we won't tell anyone. Another one absolutely insisted that they take us to Gustav. I'm really happy I never met Gustav. Meanwhile, I was trying to come up with an escape plan. The real prison was visible from where we were standing, but by the time the security guards from there would be able to get here, we would be dead. The staircase where we came from was pitch black, and we would stumble our way down and probably die. Either way, we end up dead. So I go for plan C. Mr. Ringleader then tells one of the guys that he should walk us home to see where we really live, and then basically threaten us if we tell. That's when I had a better idea. The roofs. We could run back down the stairs, but the abandoned prison complex was huge, and there was basically many buildings of different sizes all near each other. You could hop down from roof to roof and escape that way. Just as one of them starts arguing about taking us to Gustav, one of their phones ring, and I take that as my cue. I scream, "Dude, follow me," to my friend, and then we begin descending down the roofs. Now, I know this is stupid logic, but I thought that they'd never shoot us near a real prison. It's way too risky. It really wasn't too difficult though. We just kept jumping on a lower and lower building, and eventually we were down. Our feet hit the ground, and then we began running through the grounds. Since I knew it quite well, I knew exactly where to run to escape to a main road on the other side of the hill. I suddenly then heard the men yelling in the background, and then the sound of barking dogs. Security from the real prison must have seen us running, and they came to see who was there. I then screamed to them in the foreign language, "There's some guys up there and they've got guns." It seemed that they already knew that we were not the primary concern, as they ran in the direction we came from and not where we were going. We never stopped running until we reached the city center. We never reported anything that happened, and we don't have any follow-up on who the men were. Illegal stuff was pretty common from where we were living, but still, I don't think either of us ever expected that. To be honest though, it wasn't the first time that we heard about stuff like that. We didn't go back for months, needless to say. It was pretty insane. To think that that roof could have been the last thing I saw, or Gustavo's apartment, just absolutely terrifies me.